This is every new product that Samsung has just announced. There's new watches, the Galaxy Watch 8, the 8 Classic and the 8 Ultra. There's new software, One UI 8, which you can expect to come to all Samsung phones. And then the main event, these new foldables. There's the Galaxy Fold 7, which is not at all what I expected it to be, a Flip 7, and even for the very first time, a cheaper option, the Flip 7 FE. So let's start with the Galaxy Watch 8. Samsung turned it into a squircle. They call these new squarer edges the cushion design. The only similarity I can see between this and a cushion is it deserves to be sat on. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Circular smartwatches, I think, look a lot more sophisticated. Squarer smartwatches, like the Apple Watch, are more functional because you have less information cut off from each of the corners. But then to have a circular screened watch and then try to make it look like a square by adding this uneven, wonky bezel all around feels a lot like buying a Ferrari and then bolting a Caravan to the back of it. That said, using the thing, I have actually never been as impressed by a Galaxy Watch. In one generation, while they have bumped the price up by about £30 or $50, you get an 8% bigger battery, it's 11% thinner, it has a 50% brighter display, you get dual GPS, so location tracking is more accurate, and it's got this slightly different backing that makes it feel a lot more planted on your wrist. Plus, some of the software features are actually sick, like Running Coach, which asks you to do a 12-minute run so that it can analyze you. Then, based on how unfit it decides you are, it'll make you a plan so that one run at a time, you can work your way towards whatever you've set as your desired goal. And then, while running, it will actually tell you when you're doing well or when you're behind and you need to catch up. But also, there's a bunch of new things that the watch can measure while you're sleeping, like the load on your heart from stress, alongside things like skin temperature and room temperature. But the really important thing about this that I like is that it's not just, here's another random extra thing for you to keep track of. We have enough of those in our lives. This watch does most of that tracking in the background and then just factors in this extra information when making actually useful recommendations, like tonight you should probably get to bed at 11 p.m. And it's all topped off with a newer, slightly slicker operating system that now has the Now bar baked in too, and Gemini on your watch, which is a little bit slow to use since it's kind of like 2 layers of communication. Your watch has to go to your phone and then back to your watch again, but better than nothing. And then the Watch 8 Classic is basically the exact same story, same squircle, same features, but just with this classier, much heavier metal casing. The only extra functionality you get is the rotating bezel, which, to be fair, is actually a big deal. I'd say if you haven't tried it yet, I think you should before buying a base Galaxy Watch because it is addictively satisfying to use. And then finally, the new Galaxy Watch Ultra, which is it's actually like an ultra minor update. I would barely even call this a new watch. It's just a little bit of extra storage, starting at 64 gigs now, and this new titanium blue color. But since the other 2 watches have now suddenly had such a substantial upgrade, the appeal of the Watch Ultra, to me at least, has kind of vanished. Feels like it doesn't really make sense unless you absolutely need this military-grade protected body. But overall then, it's a pretty good year for Samsung watches. So, what about the phones? Well, the first one that I went hands-on with is the Z Fold 7. And I want to preface this by saying this had to be something special because, cards on the table, Samsung foldables have been losing their lead over the last few years, with me even having to take the Best Foldable Phone award away from Samsung last year and give it to Honor. Because frankly, Honor's phone was so much thinner, had a bigger battery, bigger screen, less noticeable crease, the list goes on for a long time. So if Samsung was going to come here today and give us another year of, here's a 5% better camera and a 5% better hinge, I was ready to riot, especially considering that this new Z Fold 7 is now $2,000, so a further $100 more than even last year. Thankfully, Samsung kind of cooked here. So the most obvious thing you're going to notice when you first pick it up is the Z Fold 7 is 26% thinner than last gen. Can you remember the last time that a phone just randomly got 26% thinner than its predecessor? I don't, and it feels like an even bigger change than it sounds like. So much so that this one phone takes Samsung from having basically the chunkiest foldable on the market to having basically the slimmest. And it's thin enough that this folding phone, at 8.9mm when folded, is almost exactly the same thickness as most bar phones, and the same weight too. It's actually lighter than my iPhone 16 Pro Max at 215 grams compared to 227. Now the second thing that you'll notice straight after that is it's also a tiny bit taller and quite a lot wider than last year's Fold 6, which is great because it actually fixes quite a few different problems all in one go. Firstly, it improves the aspect ratio on the front. It moves the phone even further away from that TV remote-like narrow experience and even closer to just normal phone territory, with a wide enough keyboard that I'm not making any spelling mistakes on this thing now. Second, it makes the inner screen now 8 inches compared to 7.6 on the Fold 6. And the way I see it, the bigger your inner screen is, the easier it is to justify carrying a foldable versus a normal bar phone, because it's like one of the only things it has going for it, and you have to put up with so many other compromises if you're going to do so. And then finally, the extra footprint is the only reason that Samsung can still keep the same sized battery as they had last gen, even with the substantial cut to thickness. Although I'm going to come back to the battery because I'm not done yet talking about the design improvements. So the ultra thin glass that you have over the inner screen is now 50% thicker. So does that make it just glass? But this has resulted in, finally, a much less noticeable crease. It's still not quite as clean as some of the other foldables out there, but hey, at least now you don't look like you have a rip going down the middle of your phone. The Z Fold 7 is made of stronger materials from practically every angle. It's got a stronger chassis, it's got a stronger hinge, it's got a stronger backing behind the screen, and there is this new blue color, which I would not normally talk about, but this feels like the first time in recent memory that a company has actually been just a tiny bit brave, and I am all for it. The only slightly unfortunate design flaw is that this is almost definitely the single wobbliest phone I have ever tried to rest on a surface, so you pretty much need a case to balance that out. Aside from that, I am pretty relieved to see that Samsung has finally ditched the under-display selfie camera that we had on previous Z Folds. I mean, it's almost awkward at this point, after 4 years of this company insisting that under-display tech was the way forward, but ultimately, this means you get a significantly higher quality selfie camera on the Z Fold 7 for it, that's also a lot wider, with a 100-degree field of view instead of 85. And they've also buffed the rear cameras a lot more than they usually do, which means, finally, the Z Fold 7 does get the same main camera as the Galaxy S25 Ultra. And there are improvements to the ultra-wide camera too. But also, just want to make this super clear, this is still not an ultra-level camera setup. If you're the kind of person who is looking for the best, then you need to know here that everything is still a tiny bit compromised. Like, you're not going to get any laser autofocus. You're not going to get close to the zoom capabilities of the Ultra phone. And because they've also had to compress the camera module so it's not bulging out as much, you get smaller lenses here that are a bit less sharp around the edges. It's good to see, and also very unsurprising to see that Samsung's fitted this with the latest top-end Snapdragon 8 Elite chip, and there's a couple of new software features, but they are, I would say, extremely minor. Like, you know the now bar that you get on your lock screen? Well, that now works with a few more apps. So it can now tell you, for example, how long your Uber's going to be. Audio Eraser has an automatic option, which lets the phone decide which background noises to remove or reduce for you. And there's some improvements to multitasking, being able to drag things between apps better and so on. It's actually such a minor software update that probably the best new software feature is one that you'll be able to get on pretty much every phone anyway. The ability to share your screen with the Gemini AI. So it can talk to you while having the full context of what you're looking at.
Okay, I see the object. It looks like a brown leather chair with black metal legs.
Not unique to this phone, but very, very cool to use. Anyways, hopefully you've watched enough of our videos at this point to know that this is coming, but I do have some bones to pick with this phone. While I'm glad to see that at least the battery size has been maintained at 4,400 mAh, it does also feel like about time we saw an increase, given that most competing phones are now using more efficient silicon carbon batteries, and some of them have even hit 6,000 mAh plus. Oh yeah, and also S Pen support is completely gone. So while Samsung's foldables have never had an S Pen built inside of them, you have at least been able to use a case to hold one in place on the back, and the inner screens used to have a digitizer that gives them compatibility with it. But that, in the process of thinning, has been chopped, which hurts a lot. For me, it just feels like Samsung's Fold and the S Pen are two products that were destined to merge with each other. I mean, this thing has the most real estate to be able to write stuff on. The phone is made for people who are trying to get lots of stuff done. The phone is literally designed to look and function like a real-life notebook, for goodness sake. But alas, that's the Fold 7, so let's talk Flip, which, unlike the Fold, whose price seems to be only ballooning year on year, is actually becoming more affordable this time. Because the Galaxy Flip 7 FE, is $899, which is a $200 saving compared to the $1,099 that you would have to pay for the flagship Galaxy Flip 7. And it just takes one look at this thing to see. This is Tech Company 101. You want to make a more affordable version of something, so you pull together a bunch of older components that you already have lying around, and you put them inside the body of your previous generation flagship product. And that's what the Z Flip 7 FE is. It's essentially identical to last year's Z Flip 6, but with a slightly slower, slightly less efficient Samsung-made Exynos chip, 8GB of RAM instead of the 12 we had there, and 128 gigs of storage compared to the 256 that the Z Flip 6 started with. In concept, this is a bit of a win-win for Samsung. They've already got the factories ready and set up to manufacture more of this design. There's basically zero R&D required, so it's way cheaper for them to do so, and that means that you as a buyer can get a flagship quality folding phone for a little bit less money than you used to be able to. Emphasis on little bit, though. This is the problem. I don't think the $200 discount is nearly enough of a price saving to justify this thing. It's very easy to find the actual Z Flip 6 brand new for $899 now, and that is just straight up the superior phone. But also, now that the Z Flip 7 is out, and it has massive improvements to the cover screen, I just feel like this older design is suddenly looking extremely outdated by comparison. So that feels like a pretty good segue to talk about that flagship Flip 7. It's not very often these days where you get such a transformative jump between the screens on two generations of phones, but this is it. With the old 3.4-inch, massively bezeled cover screen on the Flip 6 suddenly becoming this almost edge-to-edge 4.1-incher, which is now also significantly brighter and has a 120Hz refresh rate compared to 60. And it's pretty sexy. Don't get me wrong, at this point Samsung needed to do this to catch up to Motorola's Razr phones, but that doesn't actually take away from how big of a step it feels to use. And the screen's also become somewhat more useful in the process, with you now having access to much more of the camera user interface than before. You can change filters, you got a zoom slider. Samsung's even created a recording indicator type zone in between the cameras, which I have no idea how that's better than just a dot, but it's always nice when you feel like you're using software that is specifically designed around your hardware. And then the rest of the phone is basically a toned down version of the massive jumps that the Fold 7 has gotten. So for example, the inner screen is slightly larger. It's a 6.9-inch compared to the 6.7-inch before. The Flip 7 is not completely surrounded with stronger materials like the Fold is, but it does have the stronger hinge and the thicker display, which does also now lead to very minimal creasage. The new Flip is also thinner. Not a crazy amount thinner, but still, you can absolutely tell it's 6.5mm when unfolded compared to 6.9. And the thing I thought was really interesting is that a big part of this thinness improvement comes from a very unexpected place. Waterproofing. There used to be a water sealant layer that went all around the screen's edges, but this time round, by actually making sure the circuit board on the inside itself is water resistant, they can just cut that layer. This phone also has the new Gemini live screen sharing features, and I gotta say, Samsung has done a pretty good job making them fit nicely and work smoothly on the cover screen. And then there's basically just a couple of nice to have extra sprinkles, like a 4,300 mAh battery versus 4,000 last year. But you will probably burn through that extra with the larger front screen that you now have to power. This is the first flip phone to support Samsung DeX, so you can plug it into a monitor and use it as a desktop. And as usual with the Flip, there's also a couple of extra customization bits, like a new stretched font and interactive emojis that you can now choose yourself to embed onto your lock screen. Yeah, it's getting pretty strange. And that is the Flip 7. I'd say a good, but not spectacular update, considering that it's staying the same price. So, while we have a quick test of our Z Fold 7's new 200-megapixel camera, here's something about me. There are only 3 TV shows I've ever seen that I would genuinely myself consider a 10. There's You, there's Game of Thrones, and White Lotus. So you can probably imagine my pain after a very long day of travel to another country, where you're so jet-lagged and all you want to do is to crumple into a bed to watch one of these, getting the error message that I got from Now TV. This service is unavailable in your location. Thankfully, this is one of like 100 moments by this point where I've been just about to tick off about something until realizing that I already have the solution to fix all of these annoying internet issues. So I swiped up, I opened Surfshark VPN, our sponsor, I changed my virtual location to the UK, where I know Now TV does work, and like magic, I go back onto the Now TV app, Everything loads and we watch the full episode just fine. And if you go to surfshark.com/boss and use the code BOSS, you can have Surfshark for literally $2 a month for an unlimited number of people. So you buy it once and just share it with every single person you know.